Hey book girlies, I'm Sarah.
Hey gamer guys, it's Ian.
And you're listening to a pod of sass and sarcasm. You want me to start talking? It's your segment, sir.
I suppose I actually don't know what I was telling you guys last.
I know it's been a little while since we've recorded because the last section was really, really hard to get through, and then it's been busy.
Well, I've been playing more Return to Moria, and I played a lot with some of my friends, and then I played a little bit on my own as well.
And what did you do while you were playing? Like, what was going on? What was happening?
Well, we did the same section multiple times because we kept changing which person's world we were in. We killed the Kraken multiple times.
Did it just keep coming back, or you just redid that mission?
We changed worlds, so once the Kraken is dead in a world, it's dead in that world. But we're trying to progress multiple people's worlds at the same time. We're like, all right, we've done quite enough now, and we're kind of tired of this place. Hey, do you want to hop over here and help me with the Kraken? So you can't do much. You're like locked in that area until you kill the Kraken. Once you kill the Kraken, you can keep going. And it's just a lot easier with another person there.
So you killed the Kraken in your world and somebody else's world and somebody else's world?
Yeah. Then I went back to Andrew's world.
Sorry, when you said Andrew's world, immediately in my head, I heard Elmo's world.
Elmo's world.
La 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 la, la 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 la, we killed the Kraken in here.
And we continued progress in that world pretty far, actually. And then when we were progressing, I didn't get to see this part, but because Andrew was ahead of me, we made it up the steps, which is one of the things we see in one of the Lord of the Rings movies. Because they cross the steps. That's how they get out. We go up the steps, but we can't cross them because they broke in the movie. And then we see a dragon. Well, Andrew saw a dragon. I didn't see a dragon. And they're like, oh my goodness, it's a dragon.
Was it Smaug?
No, Smaug's been dead.
Oh, was it Smaug's children?
I don't know enough about that. And so we were messing around, and then after that, we went back to my world, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go do some mining and get some resources. And then one of the areas is you have to descend into a pit. And I was like, all right, I'll make some rope ladders to get down there and whatnot. And then I fell into the pit and died.
Good job.
I was like, I don't want to run back right now, so I just quit out of the game. I haven't been back yet to try to get my body back.
Do you want to hear more about the book?
I suppose. Let's hear the sad things.
Okay, well, to be perfectly honest, I think the worst of it is over. We're in a really weird spot story-wise and like knowledge-wise, because after the last episode, I did take a small break where I didn't read this for a little while, and then I did continue reading after a little bit just to see if I could handle it and see what else happened. And then I very much considered not continuing after this section that I'm about to tell you about, and I had a conversation with Bree about it, and there's a whole thing, which we'll get to when we get there. So I do have notes that I took while I was reading this part. So this is all, I have more hindsight. Like I've actually finished the book at this point, but when I wrote these notes, I hadn't finished the book. So this is all of the notes that I have in here are still my thoughts from when I was reading. So I'm going to try not to spoil anything for anyone when I'm reading my notes, and then I'll be like, oh, that's not right. I'm going to be like, nope, that was just a prediction I had or whatever, you know. So a quick recap. We are continuing to read The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. Isabelle is part of the Free French movement and operates as a courier for the underground, as well as the Nightingale, who is tasked with guiding downed airmen across the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. Most recently, she discovered Operation Spring Wind that the Nazis devised, deporting all foreign-born Jews in the entire country of France into work camps in Germany. Immediately, she tried to hide her neighbors in the hidden room in her closet, but was only able to save a few people. The next day, she started to realize the scale of the operation as she walked toward the sporting stadium that was overcrowded with people being put on buses directed at concentration camps in Germany. Vienne had been trying to survive and prepare for another winter with Captain Beck as her only source of food. She started sharing her rations with Rachel. While she was visiting at Rachel's one day, Captain Beck came to Rachel's house to warn her and Vienne that Rachel should not be home the following day and that Rachel should either run or hide. Vienne and Rachel aren't sure if they can trust Beck and if he was genuinely warning them about the danger or if he was setting them up for a trap, but they decided to run. Before Rachel had the chance to try to use her false papers at the checkpoint to the free zone, the border guards opened fire on the queue, injuring and killing many of those that were hoping to cross, including Sarah, who was Rachel's daughter and Sophie's best friend. Vienne told Rachel to hide in the cellar and that she would take care of Sarah, and that was basically where we left off. So I'm going to jump right back into a passage because I think it explains better than I can, and unfortunately we're going to have to get back into that really sad place for a bit. Oh, I forgot to mention my one thing, but I just think that we need to give more credit to audiobook narrators for being able to get through this stuff with not necessarily a straight face, but like without crying, because I couldn't get through this stuff without crying. So I just wanted to shout out Polly Stone, who is the audiobook narrator that I've been listening to for this title, because she does, first of all, an impeccable job with the voices that she is able to give people. She does really well with the German and the French words and their accents. Like she talks in French and German accents for all of the characters, which is really nice. And she gets through the really hard parts. She does it very well, where she's obviously not getting emotional, but also conveying the emotion that the characters are feeling, which is just really well done. And I don't know if audiobook narrators get as much credit as they should. Vienne went to the lilac bush her mother had planted 30 years ago. It had spread tall and wide along the wall. Beneath it, almost lost amid the summer greenery, were the 3 small white crosses, 2 for the miscarriages she'd suffered, and 1 for the son who'd lived less than a week. Rachel had stood there, beside her, as each of her boys were buried. Now Vienne was here, alone, to bury her best friend's daughter, her daughter's best friend. What kind of benevolent God would allow such a thing? In the last few moments before dawn, Vienne sat near the mound of fresh-turned earth. She wanted to pray, but her faith felt far away, the remnants of another woman's life. Slowly she got to her feet. As the sky turned lavender and pink, she went to her backyard, where the chickens clucked and flapped their wings at her unexpected arrival. She stripped off her bloody clothes, left them in a heap on the ground, and washed up at the pump. Then she took a linen nightdress from the clothesline, put it on, and went inside. She was bone-tired and soul-weary, but there was no way she could rest. She lit an oil lamp and sat on the divan, closed her eyes. The door to the guest room opened. She heard Beck coming toward her. He was dressed in his uniform and freshly shaved, and she knew instinctively that he'd been waiting for her return, worrying about her. "You're returned," he said. She was sure he saw some spatter of blood or dirt somewhere on her, at her temple or on the back of her hand. There was an almost imperceptible pause. She knew he was waiting for her to look at him, to communicate what had happened, but she just sat there. If she opened her mouth, she might start screaming, or if she looked at him, she might cry, might demand to know how it was that children could be shot in the dark for nothing. "Maman," Sophie said, coming into the room. "You were not in bed when I woke up. I got scared." She clasped her hands in her lap. "I'm sorry, Sophie." "Well," Beck said, "I must leave. Goodbye." As soon as the door closed behind him, Sophie came closer. She looked a little bleary-eyed. Vienne closed her eyes. She would have to give her daughter this terrible news, and then what? She would hold her daughter and stroke her head and let her cry, and she would have to be strong. She was so tired of being strong. "Come, Sophie," she said, rising. "Let's sleep a little longer if we can." So I think that Vienne or Isabel is the old woman. For a long time, we've been trying to figure out who the old woman is. And obviously it's one of the sisters, because why include them?
Yeah.
And for a long time, we've been saying Isabel because Isabel's the one with the sass. Isabel's the one who dragged the trunk into the basement or the cellar, and Isabel is the Nightingale and all of that kind of stuff. So it's like everything is pointing to Isabel. But I think both Vienne and Isabel will work to hide people or smuggle them out of France. And I think that one of them dies. And for a long time, you and I have been saying that if either of them are going to die, it's going to be Isabel because she's so reckless.
Yeah.
And My prediction is that if Isabel dies, I think that Vienne will assume the identity of Juliet Gervais and continue the work as the Nightingale or something along those lines.
That's an interesting prediction.
One of the things that kind of messes me up with this, though, is, I mean, there's a lot of things that are wrong with both Isabel and Vienne being the old woman. Because if Vienne's the old woman, Vienne has had 2 miscarriages and a child that was born who was alive less than a week. And then she had Sophie, and she's said that she's pretty sure she can't have any more children. And we don't know if her husband is coming back. We don't know a lot of stuff. My issue is that this old woman is taking place in 1995, which is only 50 years after the end of the war. And so to have at least one grown child and a husband of a decent amount of time, because she does talk about her husband who died a little bit prior, it is a little bit odd that to me it would be odd if it was Isabel, because Isabel is so young and reckless and stuff like that, and versus like maybe
I was gonna say, she'd be like 70.
Yeah, we already did the math. I'm not going to do the math again, but just given that she's like in her early 20s in this part of the book and then would have to get married pretty immediately after the war, especially, I can't remember if the old woman has said yet how long she's been married, but it seemed like a long time. And so it wouldn't be impossible, but it would be like cutting it really close, which seems odd. So then Vienne and Sophie go into town later that day and spend the entire time waiting in ration queues. Vienne expected to see something to indicate the trouble that Beck had warned her about, because again, this is the next day. Like, Beck came over yesterday and said, don't be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then that whole situation with Sarah happened last night, and now we're just in the next day. So Vienne expected to see something to indicate the trouble that Beck had warned her about, like extra soldiers, more police presence, something, anything. But so far, throughout the day, everything seemed to be normal. Around 3 o'clock, Sophie asked if they could go home since there was nothing left in the ration lines. There's nothing left to be had. And Vienne was a little bit confused by this. She was like, shouldn't there be something going on? And then she thought, well, Beck must have been mistaken or was being overly cautious, because it seemed that no one has been rounded up yet. And the Germans were too punctual and organized to arrest people during the dinner hour because they loved their French food and their French wine. So they weren't gonna be doing that kind of thing over the dinner hour. The Germans anyways wouldn't. So she agrees to go home. On the way home, Sophie asked if Sarah could come over, because she doesn't know. And that's when Vienne tried to tell her that Sarah died. Sophie was too old to be lied to and too young for the truth, so Vienne tried to put it delicately, saying that sometimes people just die unexpectedly. And Sophie replied with, I'm not stupid. I know what happened. She's Jewish.
Okay.
So Sophie is starting to grow up and is starting to really see what's going on with the war, which I think in some part is part of that has to be because of Isabel being there, because there have already been some times when Sophie's been like, Isabel wouldn't let this happen. And Vienne's like, yeah, well, Isabel isn't here or whatever. And so she's starting to see what's going on. And, you know, she is wanting to rebel in a way, but she doesn't know how. And Vienne keeps kind of scolding her whenever she does rebel. So Sophie took a moment to be angry, to grieve. And then she said she was going inside to take a nap. And Vienne was too tired to argue with any of this. She wanted to be a better mother and, you know, help Sophie through this grieving process, to shape her anger into like the type of grief that just allows you to remember the love that you had for a person. But instead, she was just like, you know what? Be angry. Go to bed. So after Sophie went inside to go take a nap, Vienne decided that she should go check on Rachel in the barn cellar. She wiped the grass from her skirt and headed up to the barn. Inside, she rolled the Renault forward and opened the cellar door. Rachel? It's me. Thank God, came a whispery voice from the darkness. Rachel climbed up on the creaking ladder and emerged into the dusty light, holding Ari. What happened? Rachel asked tiredly. Nothing. Nothing? I went to town. Everything seemed normal. Maybe Beck was being overly cautious, but I think you should spend one more night down there. Rachel's face was drawn, tired looking. I'll need diapers and a quick bath. Ari and I both smell. The toddler started to cry. She pushed the damp curls away from her sweat-dampened forehead and murmured to him in a soft, lilting voice.
I think, sorry to interrupt slightly, but I think it's already happened and she just didn't notice. I feel that there weren't very many Jewish people present in town normally.
Oh, because of the ordinances?
Because of the ordinances. And then since she was
in town
in Q, she's not used to seeing them since they weren't really allowed to be in Q. So I think it's already happened.
Interesting. I guess we'll find out.
That means we're about to find out.
They left the barn and headed for Rachel's house next door. They were nearly to the front door when a French police car pulled up out front. Paul got out of the car and strode into the yard carrying his rifle. "Are you Rachel de Champlain?" he asked. Rachel frowned. "You know I am." "You are being deported. Come with me." Rachel tightened her hold on Ari. "Don't take my son. He is not on the list," Paul said. Vienne grabbed his sleeve. "You can't do this, Paul. She is French." "She's a Jew." He pointed his rifle at Rachel. "Move." Rachel started to say something, but Paul silenced her, grabbed her by the arm, yanked her out onto the road, and forced her into the back seat of his automobile. Vienne meant to stay where she was, safe. Intended to, but the next thing she knew, she was climbing into the backseat of Paul's automobile before he stomped on the gas. "Go," Rachel said as they passed Les Jardins. "This is no place for you. This is no place for anyone," Vienne said. Even a week ago, she might have let Rachel go alone. She might have turned away, with regret, probably, and guilt, certainly, but she would have thought that protecting Sophie was more important than anything else. Last night had changed her. Still, she felt fragile and frightened, maybe more so, but she was angry now, too. In town, there were barricades on a dozen streets. Police wagons were everywhere, disgorging people with yellow stars on their chests, herding them toward the train station where the cattle cars waited. A train waited, puffing black smoke into the already hot air. 2 German soldiers were standing on the platform. One of them was Beck. He was holding a whip. A whip? It was the French police who were in charge of the roundup. They were forcing people into the lines and shoving them onto the cattle cars. Men went into one, women and children into the other. Up ahead, a woman holding a baby tried to run. A gendarme shot her in the back. She pitched to the ground, dead. The baby rolled to the boots of the gendarme holding a smoking gun. Rachel stopped, turned to Vienne. "Take my son," she whispered. The crowd jostled them. "Take him! Save him!" Rachel pleaded. Vienne didn't hesitate. She knew now that no one could be neutral. Not anymore. And as afraid as she was of risking Sophie's life, she was suddenly more afraid of letting her daughter grow up in a world where good people did nothing to stop evil, where a good woman could turn her back on a friend in need. She reached for the toddler and took him in her arms. "You!" A gendarme stabbed Rachel in the shoulder with the butt of his rifle so hard she stumbled. "Move." She looked at Vienne, and the universe of their friendship was in her eyes. The secrets they'd shared, the promises they'd made and kept. The dreams for their children that bound them as neatly as sisters. Vienne backed away. Before she knew it, I'm not going to cry for another episode, I swear to God. Vienne backed away. Before she knew it, she had turned and began shoving her way through the crowd, away from the platform and the soldiers and the dogs, away from the smell of fear and the crack of whips and the sound of women wailing and babies crying. She didn't allow herself to slow until she reached the end of the platform. There, holding Ari closely, she turned around. Rachel stood in the black, yawning entrance of a cattle car, her face and hands still smeared with her daughter's blood. She scanned the crowd, saw Vienne, and raised her bloody hand in the air, and then she was gone, shoved back by the women stumbling around her. The door to the cattle car clanged shut.
All right. I guess my hopeful prediction was just wrong. I was like, oh, maybe she can hide out in there for a couple more days and then try to sneak across again. But nope. I can't believe they tried to go back to her house right away.
They were going back, because I thought that too. I was like, what the hell was the point of that? But again, it was that Ari needed diapers and Vienne doesn't have those. So they needed to go to Rachel's house for the supplies that the toddler would need. And Rachel's like, I need a bath, which could have been done at Vienne's. But at the same time, they're like, well, if we're stopping over to get Ari some supplies anyways.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to judge their decisions, but I'm just...
Yeah, it's a frustrating... Like, as soon as I heard that they were going back to Rachel's, I was like, don't do it.
Why would you go back to Rachel's? You were told to hide for the day.
Well, he did say in the morning. Beck had said, like, she should not be here tomorrow morning, specifically.
Well, that was just a discreet way of saying be anywhere else. I guess he was too discreet.
And also, I think that Vienne has been trying her best to pretend that the war isn't actually happening. And she, I think, just couldn't grasp really like the reality of the situation. Like, they'd been hearing about these deportations, but she's like, that isn't actually what's going on, right? That couldn't actually happen. And I don't think that she realizes the magnitude of it until now. And she doesn't realize that it can affect her. I think we've talked about it previously where, you know, there's a lot of times when you see and hear about bad things that are happening and you're like, oh, that's awful, but that couldn't happen to me. And then it does.
I don't think it was even crossed her mind because her husband was a soldier, right?
Rachel's husband?
Yeah.
Yes.
And they were supposed to be safe. But
yes. But the Vichy government had been lying for quite some time.
Yeah. So they thought they were somewhat secure, but I guess who knows?
When Vienne returned home, she was obviously exhausted, defeated, and angry. Sophie came out asking where Rachel was and why Vienne had Ari, and for the first time, Vienne did not stress over her answer. Instead, she said that Rachel is gone. Again, this is something that is making me start to believe that maybe Vienne is the old woman, because at the very beginning of the book, when the old woman had this very sassy comment about how she was remembering people that she'd lost, and she was like, lost? It sounds like I misplaced my loved ones. They are not lost. They are gone. And so specifically, Vienne telling Sophie that Rachel is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's starting to use that same language. So that's why I'm like, ooh, I wonder if Vienne is the old lady.
Yeah, because now she kind of has a son, if she keeps.
Yes. She does, I'll tell you that, because we'll get into that a little bit.
I was like, what else would she do? Just like the last little bit of her friend.
Yeah, she wouldn't give up Ari or anything like that. She also started using the words gone for Sarah and for Antoine. And for a second, Sophie's like, wait, is Papa dead? And she's like, no, but he's not here, so he's gone. And now she's also starting to use the word gone for Rachel. And so, again, Antoine isn't dead, according to Vienne. As far as she knows, he's not dead anyways, but he is missing from their lives. And the grief is close to the same as the grief that you would feel for somebody who did die. And so she told Sophie to look after Ari while she went to get more supplies from Rachel's house, because again, that was where they were headed in the first place. When she returned, she worked on cleaning up the mess that had been made over the last 24 hours, like cleaning up her clothes that she had discarded, cleaning up Ari, all of the stuff. And she was crying and praying, and then she heard a motorcycle come up the road and park out front. Madame, she spun to face him. Where's your whip, Herr Captain? You were there? How does it feel to whip a French woman? You can't think I would do that, madame. It sickens me. And yet you were there, as were you. This war has put us all where we don't want to be. Less so for you Germans. I tried to help her, he said. At that, Vienne felt the rage go out of her. Her grief returned. He had tried to save Rachel. If only they had listened to him and kept her hidden longer. She swayed. Beck reached out and steadied her. You said to hide her in the morning. She was in that terrible cellar all day. By afternoon, I thought everything seemed normal. Von Richter adjusted the timetable. There was a problem with the trains. Vienne looked up at him. Where are they taking her? It was the first substantive question she'd ever asked him. To a work camp in Germany. I hid her all day, Vienne said again, as if it mattered now. The Wehrmacht aren't in control anymore. It's the Gestapo and the SS. They're more brutes than soldiers. Why were you there? I was following orders. Where are her children? Your Germans shot Sarah in the back at the frontier checkpoint. Mein Gott, he muttered. I have her son. Why wasn't Ari on the list? He was born in France and is under 14. They are not deporting French Jews. He looked at her. Yet, Vienne caught her breath. Will they come for Ari? I believe that soon they will deport all Jews, regardless of age or place of birth. And when they do, it will become dangerous to have any Jew in your home. Children deported alone. The horror of it was unbelievable, even after what she'd already seen. I promised Rachel I'd keep him safe. Will you turn me in? I am not a monster, Vienne. It was the first time he'd ever used her Christian name. He moved closer. I want to protect you, he said. It was the worst thing he could have said. She had felt lonely for years, but now she truly was alone. He touched her upper arm, almost a caress, and she felt it in every part of her body, like an electrical charge. Unable to help herself, she looked at him. He was close to her, just a kiss away. All she had to do was give him the slightest encouragement, a breath, a nod, a touch, and he would close the gap between them. For a moment, she forgot who she was and what had happened today. She longed to be soothed, to forget. She leaned the smallest bit forward, enough to smell his breath, feel it on her lips, and then she remembered. all at once in a whoosh of anger, and she pushed him away so he stumbled. She scrubbed out her lips as if they'd touched his. "We can't," she said. Of course not. But when he looked at her, and she looked at him, they both knew that there was something worse than kissing the wrong person. It was wanting to. So I need to reiterate to Bree, you lied.
Yeah, I was going to say, Bree
were wrong.
Nothing going on. I'm like, there's been stuff going on the whole time.
So I did have a conversation with Bree after this part, and she was like, no, I didn't say that there wasn't anything between them. She was like, I said that nothing comes of it. But I'm like, Bree, to me, this is something. The whole like wanting to kiss him is something. Like, they don't ever become a romantic couple. They both have their respective spouses, and as far as we know, both of them are still alive. So there's going to be nothing in the physical sense of a relationship, but that is something.
Yeah, it's an emotional connection that they have. That's almost worse.
It's so weird and uncomfortable and gross, and I don't know how to feel about it. So, because on the one hand, like, we can sit here and judge both of them for being like not faithful to their spouses, but at the same time, I'm like, one, this is war. Two, they haven't seen their spouses in a long time. I mean, Beck occasionally goes back to Germany.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that they have shown that they do care about each other, and that he seems to have been trying to make up for the whole list thing since it happened, kind of thing. Like, he has been turning a blind eye for most of this book, not only to Isabel, but to stuff with Vienne. And he's been showing that he cares about her, like with offering her the aspirin when Sophie was sick, feeling horrible that Vienne wasn't eating and then she collapsed. And he's like, I don't know how to help her.
Because, like, how can you not care about someone that you've been living with for years?
Right. Because it has been years at this point.
It's been years. At this point, yeah. Because some people are engaged for less time before they get married.
True. Technically, we were engaged for less time, but we've known each other for a long time. we were only engaged for 8 months after 7 years together. But anyways, okay.
Wow.
Additionally, I just think that this is not the time or the place for that kind of... I'm like, dude, she's grieving basically her niece, like the equivalent of a niece, like because she and Rachel were closer than she is with her own actual sister. And
people do weird stuff when emotions are high,
I guess. So anyways, throughout that summer, Vienne hid Ari, who's again Rachel's son, and basically treated him like her own. He's like 2 or 3 at this point, so he's starting to know who he is. He can do a little bit of talking. He knows his name is Ari. He knows that his mom is Rachel for the most part. But she now has to kind of go through and reteach him to not say that, because that's going to become dangerous for him, according to Captain Beck. So she didn't dare bring him out in public. She didn't want to raise any kind of suspicions about who he was, because she hadn't been pregnant. People would have noticed if he was hers, at some point. And so she's not able to claim that she could birth him, or that she did birth him in any way. And everyone knew how close she had been to Rachel. So since she's under the impression that it's not going to be long before all Jews, regardless of age or origin, would be deported, which she knows is going to set herself up for a dangerous situation if anyone knew she even had him with her, let alone who he was. Sophie, who I think is 11 at this time, steps up and helps take care of Ari while Vienne goes out to the ration lines. And on one such day, a very, very rainy day, she comes home without much luck from the queues, and she tells Sophie to go give Ari a bath while she prepares dinner. Today, after a long, slogging day standing in the line, only to be told there was nothing left, Vienne left town feeling defeated. There were rumors of more deportations, more roundups, happening all over France. Thousands of French Jews were being held at internment camps. At home, she hung her wet cloak on an exterior hook by the front door. She had no real hope that it would dry out before tomorrow, but at least it wouldn't drip all over her floor. She stepped out of her muddy rubber boots by the door and went into the house. As usual, Sophie was standing by the door, waiting for her. "I'm fine," Vienne said. Sophie nodded solemnly. "So are we. Will you give Ari a bath while I make supper?" Sophie scooped Ari into her arms and left the room. Vienne uncoiled the scarf from her hair and hung it up. Then she set the basket in the sink to dry out and went to the pantry, where she chose a sausage and some undersized softening potatoes and onions. Back in the kitchen, she lit the stove and preheated her black cast iron skillet. Adding a drop of the precious oil, she browned the sausage. Vienne stared down at the meat, breaking it up with her wooden spoon, watching it turn from pink to gray to a nice crusty brown. When it was crispy, she added cubed potatoes and diced onions and garlic. The garlic popped and browned and released its scent into the air. "That smells delicious." "Herr Captain," she said quietly. She turned down the flame on the stove and covered the pan, then faced him. By tacit agreement, they both pretended that the night in the orchard had never happened. Neither had mentioned it, and yet it was in the air between them always. Things had changed that night, subtly. He ate supper with them most nights now, mostly food that he brought home. Never large amounts. Just a ham slice, or a bag of flour, or a few sausages. He spoke openly of his wife and children, and she talked about Antoine. All their words were designed to reinforce a wall that had already been breached. He repeatedly offered, most kindly, to mail Vienne's care packages to Antoine, which she filled with whatever small items she could spare. Vienne made sure never to be alone with Beck. That was the biggest change. She didn't go out to the backyard at night or stay up after Sophie went to bed. She didn't trust herself to be alone with him. "I have brought you a gift," he said, and held out a set of papers. A birth certificate for a baby born in June of 1939 to Etienne and Ami Mauriac, a boy named Daniel Antoine Mauriac. Vienne looked at Beck. Had she told him that she and Antoine had wanted to name a son Daniel? She must have, although she didn't remember it. "It is unsafe to house Jewish children now, or it will be very soon." "You have taken such a risk for him, for us," she said. "For you," he said quietly. "And they are false papers, madam. Remember that, to go along with the story that you adopted him from a relative." "I will never tell them that they came from you. It is not myself I worry about, madam. Ari must become Daniel immediately, completely, and you must be extremely careful. The Gestapo and the SS are brutes. The Allied victories in Africa are hitting us hard, and this final solution for the Jews, it is an evil impossible to comprehend. He paused, gazed down at her. "I want to protect you." "You have," she said, looking up at him. He started to move toward her, and she to him, even as she knew it was a mistake. Sophie came running into the kitchen. "Ari is hungry, maman. He keeps complaining." Beck came to a stop, reaching past her, brushing her arm with his hand. He picked up a fork on the counter. Taking it, he speared one perfect bite of sausage, a crispy brown cube of potato, a chunk of caramelized onion. As he ate it, he stared down at her. He was so close now she could feel his breath on her cheek. "You are a most amazing cook, madame." "Merci," she said in a tight voice. He stepped back. "I regret I cannot stay for supper, madame. I must away." Vienne tore her gaze from him and smiled at Sophie. "Set the table for 3, she said. Ew.
Yeah, they're like, no, shouldn't, but they both really want to.
Yeah. So, first of all, Vienne, just stop flirting with a Nazi. Secondly, I don't care how nice he is to you or that he seems to have somewhat of a heart or a conscience about being on the wrong side of history. He's married, you're married, you both claim to love your families, but then you're completely disregarding like this. It's just, it's so fucking weird. I don't like it. And also quit flirting in front of Sophie. Sophie's not stupid. She's already established that she knows what's going on. So like, it makes me so uncomfortable. But I do think that it shows the layered issues that people faced as far as like, okay, so Beck has never been cruel to her and he almost seems like a good guy, but then he does some stuff that you're like, what the fuck, dude? You were holding a whip at the, like, and helping people get herded into cattle cars. Like, what the fuck is that? And he's like, I'm following orders. And so it's like this layered complicity that shows what many people had to like put up with, but also like the decisions that people had to make as far as being able to protect themselves, but also like how do you get out of the system? How do you rebel against the system without putting a target on your own back? There's also like the people that knew what was going on but didn't actively stop it, or like Beck, who was following orders even though they might have disagreed with them. Like, you still did it. And it's just, I don't know. I know that that's part of what this romance between them is about, but it's still weird and it's still really gross and I still really hate it. I do like seeing Beck breaking the rules to protect Vienne and by extension Ari and Sophie, but he's made it clear, in my opinion, that he's a very selfish man and he really is only trying to protect Vienne because he likes her.
Yeah, that's been made pretty clear.
And so it's like, it's not that he would not have warned them about the deportation. If he didn't think it was going to hurt Vienne in some way, he would have just been like, okay, whatever. Because remember, he came to Rachel's house to talk to Vienne. He was like, Madame Mauriac, I have something to tell you. And then he finally looked at Rachel after like a while of, she's like, I own this house. What the fuck are you talking about? And he was like, it doesn't matter. But first he was addressing Vienne. And so it's not like he actually cares what happened to Rachel. He only cared what happened to Rachel because it would affect Vienne. And he doesn't want to see Vienne upset because he's weird and creepy. I don't know. It's like, if he's willing to break these rules, what other rules would he be willing to break if the right pressures are applied? That's the thing that makes me really nervous, is that I wonder if he could be persuaded to hurt Vienne in some way if like his job was at stake or if his actual family was at stake,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think he would break promises. I think he might do something if it could get him either selfishly closer to Vienne or if it would save his own neck kind of thing. So I know I've said this quite a bit, but I keep going back to the old woman. I feel like Beck is going to be one of the men, either the man that the old woman killed or the one she feels like she should have. Either way, I'm kind of going back to not trusting him because I know that when I talked to Brie about it, because I was deciding if I wanted to keep going with this book, she was like, he continues to be at least an ally to Vienne, and anything he does from here on out, it seems like it's going to be for the purpose of serving her in some way. That doesn't mean, though, that I think that I still think that I can't quite trust him, even knowing that he is not necessarily, like, he will turn a blind eye to anything that Vienne does, but
as long as someone else doesn't see. And he's always kind of made that a bit clear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only helping you as long as it's safe-ish for me to do so.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that he either does something that makes one of the sisters wish that she killed him. Because remember, like, she's like, there's the man I killed and the one I should have. So it's possible that he's the person that they should have killed. And so either he does something that makes them wish that they killed him, or he does something to end up dead, or end up killed. I'm worried. I wrote this note before I talked too much to Brie about stuff. I was worried that he might try something with Vienne non-consensually or something, and maybe she shoots him. Because again, I am genuinely starting to think that Vienne could be the old woman, and she could have adopted Ari, who is now going to be going by Daniel, as her son. However, previously when we've met her son...
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is the son's name?
Her son's name is Julian, which is the same as Isabel and Vienne's father. So they name their son Julian. So is it possible that Vienne adopts another kid and names him Julian?
Maybe.
Is it possible she births another kid? I mean, she says no, but that doesn't mean... She's in her early 30s.
Yeah, she says, I don't know if she meant that she doesn't think she can make it through the pregnancy.
Right.
Meaning...
Like emotionally?
Yeah. We know she's had miscarriages and lost a child. And now she has one. But that doesn't mean she can't get pregnant again.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just also have a hard time seeing Isabel as a mother, especially with adopting somebody during the war, if that's the reason that they have a kid. I guess it's possible. That Isabel...
Well, a lot can change in 1 year.
That's true. We're also still in 1942 at this point in the book. I've just been thinking that Isabel is really reckless and she could end up getting herself or someone else killed. And to me, that doesn't seem like the type to be a mother to somebody. I don't know. You know what I mean?
I kind of get where you're going.
What if she gets... I mean, if she gets herself killed, then obviously she's not the old woman. But if she gets somebody else, I'm wondering if she gets somebody like Gaetan killed or her love interest killed or Captain Perkins or whatever his name was.
It was Captain Perkins, yeah.
Was he a captain, though?
I don't know. Airman Perkins.
So that's where I am in the book. The next chapter goes back to talking about Isabel.
Well, not actually where you are in the book.
No, that's where I was at when I wrote these notes. So I guess we'll see if I keep flipping back and forth between the sisters on who I think the old woman is until we get a definite answer. But I'm nervous that somebody's going to die soon in the book.
More people are going to die?
Yes. Specifically, I think a man is going to die.
Yeah, when we go back to Isabel, I think we're going to see something go down. Mm-hmm. I don't like the way you said that. We're going to see something bad happen. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm trying not to give it away because, first of all, rereading these notes being like, I think this is going to happen. It's so weird now with the hindsight of stuff, which I guess I've always been doing because I'm like, I know what comes next. And I made this prediction and then I read and then like that and my prediction came true. But it's more stuff that happens within the scope of the episode is like where my predictions tend to come true versus your predictions tend to be like longer term, like story arc type things. And so this is weird because now these predictions that I have are like story arc stuff and I don't know. Some of them are true, some of my predictions don't come true, so just so you know.
I mean, I can predict story arc type things if I know what type of story they're trying to tell. But this one has been, they started telling a story I didn't want them to start telling.
So you weren't
I wanted like a
interested in it.
spy type novel that took place during World War II in Paris, but we're all over the place now.
Yeah.
This is more like exploring history.
I think it was hard because it was hard to tell what kind of historical fiction this was going to be. And I don't know, it has been all over the place. Like, is it going to be the type where, like, this story would have been very different if Isabel remained in Caraveau. I thought she might, and I thought she was going to get herself or somebody killed. Early on, you were talking about maybe Antoine would come home and he would end up dead because of something Isabel did or something like I thought it might have been something like that. But then she goes off to Paris and you're like, cool, it's a spy novel. And then nope, never mind. It's not a spy novel, which it could have been.
Yeah, it's an exploring history novel. I'm just trying to hit all the aspects of history that happened during this time period and just showing the types of people that were involved.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. It was just, I wish that was a little bit more clear at the onset.
This author's done quite a good job of like exploring the human condition of terrible times.
Mm-hmm. It is very well written. It is very well researched. And I think it's still a very important book to read. But it's just difficult. And it's difficult for different reasons for different people. Obviously, for me, like, it's hard because I'm Polish. I'm like a majority Polish in my bloodline. And I know that the Germans were very cruel to Polish people just as much or nearly as much anyways as they were to the Jewish people. So it's like, and we were looking this up the other day because, again, this book is really hard and heavy and they killed a huge majority of the Polish population.
Yeah. So we were looking at total number of Jews killed and then total number of non-Jewish Poles killed. Mm-hmm. But then part of the total Polish deaths wasn't fully captured there because a lot of the people living in Poland were also Jewish. So it's like, how much of that country was just gone? Right.
Well, because like 3.3 million of the deaths in the concentration camps were Jewish Poles, basically. So it's like half of the Jewish... So 6 million Jews were killed, and about half of those Jews were also Polish. So, for me, that's why this book has been very hard, because I have that kind of a personal connection to it. Whereas other people have personal connections, like they have family members that are World War II vets that had seen some shit. And then there's the hard side of having German ancestry and knowing that you are potentially related to people who committed some very atrocious acts. So no matter what side of history you're coming from, it's hard to get through this book. Mm-hmm. Like it's, again, a good book. I think it's necessary to read, and I think it's necessary to be uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, I think that might be the purpose.
And especially to be uncomfortable with the people who knew what was happening but didn't do anything about it, or who they didn't necessarily know what was happening, but they knew that they should be rebelling, but they chose not to save their own skin.
Save their own skin, feed themselves and their family, and yeah, just a terrible time all around.
Mm-hmm. So, what did you learn today?
I don't know.
Don't be flirting with Nazis.
Yeah, don't be flirting with Nazis in your kitchen in front of your kid and wanting to kiss them over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, how many times was this? Like one or two chapters? I feel like it was one and a half.
It was a couple of chapters.
Okay. It's like every time he was close, she was like, if I just lean in, he'll try to kiss me. And I'm like, and then she leans in and then pushes. I'm like, and also like, dude, get away from her.
Stop saying, I want to protect you because you
I want to protect you with my penis. So gross.
Yeah. I learned that in the Mines of Moria, you all have your own world, like Elmo.
Elmo's world.
La 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 la.
Oh, I want to make a new...
Ian's world.
I want to make a new world and call it Elmo's world.
You should. Oh. Well, where can people find us?
You can find us on Instagram.
At A Pot of Sass.
You can find us on Facebook.
At A Pot of Sass and Sarcasm.
You can send us an email.
At A Pot of Sass and Oh, no. It's apotofsass@gmail.com.
You can check out our Patreon.
Patreon.com/A Pot of Sass and Sarcasm.
Where I attempt to remember a book I read a while ago and explain it to Sarah.
Yes. And some other stuff that we will eventually put out. But man, this has been hard. It's been rough. It's been really heavy, and it doesn't really get any lighter or fluffier from here on out. So we seriously thank you for listening and for putting up with the heaviness, and we hope you keep listening.
Later.
Stay sassy.
Oh, fudge. Stay sassy.
Why are you suddenly censoring yourself?
Sometimes I don't like to swear, okay?
Okay.
Sometimes it doesn't call for it.
Okay, stay sassy, nerds.
Later.